And then we've got AI as a cost control engine. It's critical for margin protection. There's a lot of technology, a lot of complexity involved in that. When we talk about automation, energy optimization, reduced truck rolls, which one of those use cases in your mind are generating OPEX savings in the midterm?
Yeah, so the answer is probably all of them. Where would we be putting our bets? Where there's greatest labour concentration that could be deployed better elsewhere. I'd say call centres are close to the top of every telco exec's agenda in terms of optimising call centres. Having a greater perceived quality of service through getting stuff done through autonomous agents than perhaps the experience of calling a telco call centre has been over the last years. So that's the near end one. The network operations there has to be a fundamental shift there, because we cannot have these dynamic services deployed manually. It breaks. We are going to need to invest in network autonomy, and you've got the TM forums levels of network autonomy. Most operators are still level 1, level 2, and trying to work out how to get to greater levels of autonomy. The fact is we have to crack that, because the products and services that we wish to put out in coming years cannot be put out manually. Right? So those would be the sort of the near-in areas I'd be looking at from a cost optimization viewpoint to get the most advantage.
You've talked about inference earlier, and one of the themes that we wanted to explore when we did the survey was also sort of edge and AI at the edge and the reality check. Now, surprisingly, I think it was 94% of the telco leaders expressed a high level of confidence in deploying edge. You predicted a reset in edge promises because of the OPEX burden that we've talked about. How should executives think about their edge assumptions and strategy going forward?
I'm pleased to hear that 94% of executives have confidence, because it's absolutely something that has to be done. The recent NVIDIA conference with 100 robots dancing around cannot be done without the inferencing at the edge, right? The latency won't support it. If you look at, there's a tension, and I don't think we've resolved it yet. We're asking network operators to use less energy in operating an increasingly complex network environment. When you start putting GPUs on the edge or in radio sites and you've got inference in the RAN, one of the unanswered questions is, what's that going to do to energy consumption? Or we've got some modelling around it, but we don't know what the adoption is going to be, and that directly impacts consumption. So that the whole edge adoption is one that requires us to take steps and probably replan at each step. Go in with the hypotheses and then see how it actually hits in reality. So it's not an argument to slow down. It's actually an argument to be quite scientific about doing stuff, testing it, and then resetting.
Focus. That's really helping to kind of create, as we go through the conversation, I'm sensing there is an order in which people need to approach that AI transformation from an inside-out perspective. You've talked about edge and you've talked about the complexity and the engineering complexity that sits with that. Now, this is something that HTEC talks a lot about. Why is that so relevant to us, and vice versa? Why is HTEC so relevant to those particular industries?
So we're talking about rethinking the network. We're talking about rethinking where compute goes within the network. One of HTEC's unique characteristics is we work from the silicon through to the application and everything in between. So we have unique capabilities and experience with partners of compiling for inference on different silicon and being able to deploy in an engineering robust manner, being able to rethink the OSS BSS requirements based on what we're seeing at levels below and what we're seeing in consumer behavior. So I think HTEC's got a lot to offer by being able to pull all the different engineering levers from silicon to operating system to application.
Before we wrap, 2 quick questions. If a telco executive team must pick one starting point to create momentum in 2026, where would that be?
Based on previous questions, there are some levers that you can pull in the short term. I would love to see AI embraced internally in the telco to drive the efficiencies, and yet use 2026 as that transition to say we're going to deploy AI-powered services on the edge. We're going to use 2026 to experiment around the economics of that, and be prepared to scale towards the end of 2026 and going forward. I will probably change my mind on this answer next year when we have the same conversation.
And in terms of, there's some strategic mistakes that operators can make. And we also talked earlier about the gap that potentially can result from slow adoption and how long that it would take for companies to regain that competitive advantage. So, what's the 1 or 2 mistakes that operators really need to avoid in the next 12 to 24 months?
Well, I alluded to pilot or POC hell earlier on, so I'll go with that. I think starting an initiative with the view that the POC is it has to stop. We need to be thinking of a defined pilot stage, and probably the technical viability has enough proof points in market. It's going to be more about the commercial viability in a pilot stage. But it's really start with the end in mind of how are we going to deploy this at scale and work back from there, because it's complex, right? And that would be the one thing that I would be encouraging telco executives and boards to focus on in 2026.
And just one additional point, as you're saying, that suddenly reminded me of something that, again, we came out of the survey, and I'd love to have your perspective on that. I think there was a very clear honesty, I guess, that this is not something that companies can do themselves. Sometimes they just need to reach out to partners externally to help them create that acceleration. And this, I know this is something that HTEC does a lot. Is that also what you're hearing when you're speaking to customers when they come to HTEC? That real importance that not all the skills necessarily exist within the organization, but actually there is a need to partner.
Yes. The AI wave, there's almost universal recognition through telco execs that it's an ecosystem play. It's about getting the best partners to push ahead in what they do well and enabling them. And this is where we have Kamara and ODA within the telco world to say, we're going to open up the network. We're going to be asking people to do what they do really well. If you think about the telco network has to be stable. It can't move at the pace of AI. So opening it up so we can have these developments on the edge is absolutely imperative. And it's partnering in multiple places. It's partnering in developing the inference on the edge. It's partnering in rethinking the network management. It's partnering in the OSS, BSS layers. It's partnering in applications. It's partnering in services that are offered to enterprises, SME and medium consumers. Right? It's not something that a telco can do all by themselves. It's not something that anybody can do all by themselves. But the telcos who are making the most progress have probably got the greatest clarity on their partnering strategy and where they're going to use best in class.